You're live. Welcome back, folks. This is Joint Justice Committee. I'm thinking of saying another committee that I'm used to saying. This is our 1 o'clock meeting on October 27th. We are running a little bit behind schedule. So we have with us right now VSCA, Steve Howard. And I know that you were scheduled earlier this morning. And we apologize for this, but I do want to give you some time. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
The record.
I appreciate the opportunity to share our members' perspective on an issue that you've heard a lot from VSCA about. VSCA has, since the onset of the staffing crisis, really about 6 years ago, brought our members to the State House to testify, their spouses to meet directly with the governor to talk about the impact on their families. We've held numerous legislative dinners to give our members a chance to talk directly to legislators. We've sent mailings to the public. We've pushed out stories to the press. And so we are not happy that we're still here having to talk about this crisis, but we want our members to know that we will never stop fighting until this crisis is over. Vermont's correction system is facing a crisis that's impossible to ignore. Vermont's prisons are dangerously understaffed. Incarcerated individuals are spending hours in lockdown, not because of bad behavior, but because there simply aren't enough corrections officers to maintain basic operations. This is more than a staffing issue. This is a humanitarian emergency. The staffing crisis at Northern State Correctional Facility, which, by the way, is in lockdown once again today because of a lack of staff, is particularly acute. Currently operating about half of the necessary security staff. Correctional officers are mandated to work 16-hour shifts day after day. On their few days off, correctional officers must remain on standby and deployable to the facility within an hour's notice. Their individual well-being and their family lives are shattered. Children's birthdays, anniversary celebrations, and holidays with their families are interrupted with work mandates. The reasons behind the staffing crisis are not complex if you're familiar with supply and demand. Vermont has a competitive labor market, an aging population, high housing costs, and fierce competition for workers. The wages to correctional officers, despite recent increases, VSCA is very proud of the fact that we fought at the table and won $30 million in additional compensation for our members since 2023. And we fought for over a decade to put in a better retirement plan for our members, one that allows them to retire 7 years earlier with full retirement. Even with those additional enhancements and investments, we are not competitive in this labor market. Many other jobs with similar pay are readily available, but without the associated risks of working in a correctional facility. Because the work of a correctional officer is so hard, it's often thankless work. The average lifespan of a correctional officer is 59 years, 16 years less than the national average. Correctional officers experience rates of depression and PTSD 3.5 and 6.5 times greater than the national average, respectively. It's physically and emotionally demanding with high rates of burnout. And add to that long shifts, mandatory overtime, and unsafe staffing ratios. And it's no surprise why recruitment and retention are faltering. VSCA is willing to work with the governor, and we want to cooperate to rectify this ongoing problem. We know what works, as staffing improvements have been accomplished, albeit temporarily, through short-term pay increases during previous staffing crises. The administration must recognize that a fully staffed correctional system with functional rehabilitation programs are necessary to meet Vermont's demand for increased accountability for criminals. Vermont correctional officers are human beings who deserve our gratitude, our respect, and time with their families. These cruel and inhumane working conditions must end. What should we do about the staffing crisis? Well, VSCA has presented idea after idea after idea, from our frontline members directly to the governor, to commissioners going back all 6 years, to the media, to anybody, to legislators, to anybody who will listen. But our members have some ideas that they know are ideas that are effective. They've seen them work. First and foremost is increase the pay and improve the benefits. And I want to make clear that when I say that, I'm not asking the legislature to do that. This is clearly something that between the governor and the VSEA, but the legislature has a lot of influence with the governor and can keep this issue in front of him and not allow it to be swept away. We know, for instance, that double time works. When there is an incentive for people to work on their days off, whether they're in the facility or in the field, we have seen the overtime shifts be filled and overtime come down. And in fact, in Senator Norris's facility, the last time we did double time, which we negotiated with Commissioner Baker, I had calls from members at his facility saying there's not enough overtime. And shortly into Commissioner Demmel's term, that agreement was terminated against VSEA's recommendation. And guess what happened? We spun right back into the same crisis we were in before. We want to make sure that when people are running toward the fire from probation and parole, that we're not nickel and diming them, that we're providing them mileage and paying for their hours and making it as easy as possible for people to leave their families and come help at a facility so that somebody who has worked their third or fourth 16-hour shift can go home and sleep. We don't think that's a radical idea. We think that's a common sense idea. VSEA has repeatedly and will repeatedly demand that managers in central office come to help in this emergency and pitch in. These are trained, experienced staff. And it really is not just important to have them come and be seen as part of the solution to the problem, but it also would go a long way to mending the divide between management and those corrections workers on the front line, which has really never been greater. This would help immensely. The massive growth in exempt and managerial positions in central office doesn't go unnoticed by our members. I had a member the other day who pulled out a card that he had from when he started in corrections, and it was all of the numbers of all of the staff that worked in corrections. There were 11 people on that list. Now we're up to 160, 170. And it's not that they're not doing important work. It's just that in this crisis, if they've been through the academy at $10,000 to $15,000 a pop, if they've worked in corrections, they've worked in a facility, now is the time for them to show up in a facility, show up in a hospital, let the frontline workers go home and have a needed rest. We would urge the Department of Corrections in the state to look at the example of the CATS team in DCF. You've heard me talk certainly in human services, but in other venues about the high-end system of care in DCF and the crisis that we were facing there. The CATS team is not perfect, but it did go out and recruit volunteers from across the Agency of Human Services who were willing to come sit with kids in the high-end system of care. And while imperfect, it has had a positive effect. We would urge the Department of Corrections to reach out to former DOC employees that are scattered all throughout state government and urge them to come in and help. We'd also urge them to open up training to anybody who's willing to come and help in a CATS-like team model. Our members overwhelmingly believe that the Department of Corrections should be moved to the Department of Public Safety. They believe that the experiment with AHS is not working. They feel like the forgotten stepchild of the Agency of Human Services, and they believe they are now being the forgotten stepchild of the new focus on the accountability agenda that the governor has announced. There is certainly a social work component to the work that our members do, but they feel like they are a critical part, and you heard some of the testimony this morning, a critical part of the public safety infrastructure. We're talking a lot about holding people accountable. The question is, who actually does hold them accountable? When they're taken off the street, which is what Vermonters are increasingly asking for, they go to corrections. They go to the facilities or they go to the field. And in that process, the workload and the pressure on our members at these staffing levels is unacceptable. So we would ask that the state, in considering their accountability agenda, which our members support, also consider the component that seems to be left out, which is additional resources to adequately staff the correctional facilities, not just to keep the facilities safe, because our members keep their colleagues safe, but they also keep the other inmates safe. They want to be able to contribute to the rehabilitative process, but rehabilitative programs come to a halt when facilities are in lockdown. No education, no recreation, none of that happens without staffing. So that is really a component that we think, especially since Act 119 is about to drop a report, they haven't already, it's time to have that discussion about whether we are paying enough attention in the Department of Corrections when it's housed in the Agency of Human Services, and whether it would be better housed in the Department of Public Safety. We also urge the legislature and the administration to consider reducing the workload, not to add to the workload, and also reduce the workload. One example of that, and you know, Madam Chair, you've heard this from going back years when I first came in with Commissioner Menard and said we don't have the resources to adequately implement the MAT program, the medically assisted treatment program. That is still proven true. We never added additional resources, and it is a huge labor-intensive program. So we need to look at that program because it's not only not enough correctional staff for security, it's not enough nursing staff to provide the level of services we're providing. It's not to say that's not a good idea or something we shouldn't do. We're just not adequately resourcing that program. And so we should look in this time of crisis, even temporarily, at scaling back some of those requirements to give our members a relief. And of course, we want to say, and we'll say with gratitude to the folks on the Institutions Committee and to the folks in the legislature and to the commissioner, we would ask you, we thank you for the $6 million for air conditioning in the correctional facilities. We ask you, and we'd ask the governor to accelerate that, to put as much energy and as much resources as possibly can to get that done so that all of our facilities are air conditioned. We have, just last year, we had 6 members from Southern State in the chair's home territory go to the hospital because they became sick because of how hot it is in the facility at Southern State. VOSHA issued a report and made recommendations for improving the working conditions there. And I mentioned it because, the biggest thing is to end the 16-hour shifts, but there's nothing that's more a slap in the face to our members than to have to be on your 4th or 5th 16-hour shift and to come into a building that is so excessively hot. It's not good for the inmates either. It makes it difficult for our members to do their jobs when it is so uncomfortable. And in fact, we had a horrible assault on a correctional officer all over a fight about a fan. That fan weren't there, and there were air conditioning in that facility. Our member would not have been so severely assaulted. So with that, Madam Chair, I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions or advice that you have for me.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for laying out some thoughts from your members in terms of how to address the staffing issues. I think it's been very helpful. Thank you. Questions? Teresa?
Not really a question, but I guess I want to echo a little bit of what the witness said. We didn't really hear this morning in this morning's testimony how with the accountability agenda, how and what kind of impact can expected to be seen on the correction system, and what kind of resources were going to be appropriated to the correction system to deal with that. Because I guess from where I'm sitting, it is going to exacerbate a situation that's already critical. And I think we've seen, and it's been proven, the data shows that it is critical. So I guess it's more of an observation, and I guess I would hope that we'll see in the governor's budget a way that they plan to address that.
Well, we will have the commissioner up again, Commissioner of Corrections. As I indicated, I do have questions.
I would just add, I think
Accountability court for him.
I really was grateful when you brought that up in the testimony this morning. The one thing I would add too is community supervision is a component of the correction system that this legislature and the people of Vermont strongly support. If our probation and parole officers are at a hospital doing the work that used to be assigned to correctional officers, and they're not out in the community monitoring who's out there in the way that they would like, And that is part of the probation and parole officers that are out there play a critical role in ensuring compliance with the court's orders and in making sure that people are doing the kind of rehabilitative work that they need to do so that they don't go back into a correctional facility. So I would also just add that we've got to end hospital coverage by the probation and parole officers. We've got to get them back 100% focused on community supervision.
Yeah, I mean, my comments were for the whole correctional system, so including probation and parole. And I don't know so much, I don't have any details about the hospital situation, but and I'm not sure I agree with the concept of corrections being in public safety. But you know, certainly an idea. But when I was referencing corrections, I meant not only in the facilities, but those folks who are in the community.
Thank you.
Questions, thoughts?
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your flexibility, Steve.
Anytime. Hope I run away phone.
We had DCF on, are they still there? So let's start first, because they may be on a tighter schedule. One thing we wanted to just get a brief update on the juvenile, which is like, and you're in BGS, but I think if we did the DCF part first.
Or I can just do some opening if you want on it and then,
Yeah.
sorry, everyone, we're just talking.
No, that's fine. If we need BGS for both.
Yeah, but I have some general comments on the youth also.
So let's let in DCF folks. So, welcome.
Good afternoon, Justice Oversight Committee. It is an honor to be here. I don't think I've ever been before this committee. I'm Wanda Manoli, Commissioner of Buildings and General Services. And I will say with regarding some of our AHS programming, I went back to BGS October 13th of last year. And it's been a very interesting year with both of these projects we're going to talk about. So I just want to share with you, and then we can talk about just the Youth Stabilization Treatment Center. And before I go into that, I think both subjects we're going to talk about today is we are experiencing, and I don't have a solution, local permitting and zoning struggles for both of these projects. And we are working, and this has added a delay in planning and in conversations that I didn't expect when I started a year ago. I think some of the procedures and the processes have sort of blurred. But what I really want to say to this committee, and towns have valid concerns, about the impact and about this permitting, and we totally understand that. And with the state projects in their communities, and we need to find a way, and we are working on that, just blending how some of these conversations should occur and how we move forward. Because if we can't get off the base to start the conversations, then what I've experienced as the commissioner in the last year is we just keep treading on the same things over and over and over again. So on both projects, the youth treatment center and the women's correctional facility, we are thinking about that. And I think that will just come forward in our conversations. I want to give you an update on the Youth Stabilization Treatment Center. So some of you know this at one time. These services were provided at Woodside, which was located in Essex, and through the legislative process, a decision to, and through certain programming, a decision to close that building for those services and find a new solution has been generated by the legislature administration. The methodology that BGS is engaged in is to utilize a design builder develop partnership. And simply that's, we are engaged with trying to find a developer who is going to take our design, develop the property, provide the land, and we will basically lease and/or lease with an option to buy. And the idea behind this is that it's going to be faster, more efficient. And my understanding, some of the decisions in the past has been because of the impact on the capital funding and the cost. So this was, I think, everyone's attempt on making something more affordable.
We have a question.
Will that be applicable to the land that is in Essex?
So
New process, would that also, would you be looking for?
this was the Virgins and the Newberry property.
Virgins and Newberry.
You're talking about,
Okay,
when you're
well,
saying,
no, you moved to.
no, when you're saying new process, what do you mean?
Leasing the land.
The design, build, and lease the
Yeah,
land?
having the facility be built on the land and then leasing the facility. Is there any hope that that might happen in Essex as well as the other places?
So I think I'd like to say to you, Senator, that just the process that we've gone through with Essex regarding the women's facility, we're still reevaluating reevaluating how we move forward with that. So we put out an RFP. And so the answer to your question is no, right now, because we just put out an RFP. And the RFP, the closing date is November 19th. As I said, the methodology and how we put the RFP together was we were looking for a developer who owned the land, who could take on the zoning and all of the permitting. So
This is for the juvenile.
yeah, that's, yep.
There.
So we had a pre-bid meeting in the last 2 weeks. We had 4 developers that did attend. I think what's important, I've got to look at my notes, is that we own the design, the existing design. So that's been more beneficial in this process, where the previous process is that we were working on a design at the Virgins property in partnership with AHS and making those changes. We now have a pretty solid program and design so that we've provided to the developers, because what is really important is, does it fit on the land you're offering? Does it have the capacity for growth? Does it have all of the connections that we need? Is it in the areas that you're looking at? So we're able this time, when we went out to RFP, to provide more detail on the project. So I'm looking forward to seeing the bids, because I'm hoping we have something more solid to truly evaluate. But one of the changes is that we want the developers to bring forward proposals that they believe, because they own the property, they know their communities, that are going to be more acceptable to a zoning change to support this type of facility. And I think, from the news and from discussions, it doesn't matter if we're talking about the youth facility or the women's facility. This is really critical to people and them understanding what's the impact. So that is the update on where we are with the design and process. Any questions?
On the juvenile facility.
Yep.
Joyce. You do have DCF.
Yeah, and so this may be anybody's answer. So my question is actually related to what you just said, Commissioner Manoli. So having been through this twice now on this facility, maybe third time's the charm, I don't know. But I guess how will you evaluate the proposals or in conjunction with DCF around the ability of a developer to deliver on permitting?
So there's not specific criteria in the, so site is part of the evaluation. It's the developer's responsibility. And that's where I think I was going to propose to us, based on their business, the land that they own, either sites that they believe can be easily get a change of use, for the type of facility. And so we'll be looking at how they put that together. That's something that's different that we asked for. We're not applying points, but they do have a responsibility to say, this is the location, this is, this is not the right word. This is, this is what we know about its existing permitting and why we think this property will be, easily moved into another category, however they put that together. We don't want a property that is going to take us 3 years to just get through a change of use, to be absolutely honest
Yeah.
with you, because it's just, that's where we are. We just keep spiraling in the same place, Representative Wood. It's, and we've got to get beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, we're frustrated too with that. Everybody is. I think I guess I'm concerned that it's not really about the property. It's about community attitudes, about the project, or honestly, this project could be Amazon, could be the women's facility, there's any variety of projects when the community has a right to weigh in, but at what point does the state's need in this particular case and in the women's case I guess I don't want to use the word outweigh, but, carry more weight, in some circumstances. So I don't really think it's about the property as much as it is about the projects. And so how will we engage with whatever community comes forward with, or whatever builder comes forward with, a particular community in sight?
Well, one of the things that I just want to say to this committee and to everyone, in working in partnership with AHS, we try very hard to engage with all of the communities and to have those discussions. So I see us taking what we've done and even trying to broaden that and to make sure people are a part of the discussion. I think, and I'm just, I've worked with all of you for so many years. My experience at these meetings is there's a lack of trust, and I'm not sure what that's from, because I think you all know me. I'm pretty honest, and if I say I'm going to work with you, I really am going to work with you. So there's that, and I think that's one of the bridges we've got to change with the youth facility. And I don't want to get into history, but Woodside and Essex wanted the state there. And it was a really great partnership, and it came through the institutions committee, and I don't know how you all pulled it off. But going forward, there's also, what is the state going to do for our community? And I think some of you are familiar that the state, for our other facilities, we have MOUs with communities. And those MOUs were based on the size, the scope, what the population was. So if you look at Springfield, a correctional facility MOU, it's much, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, it's much different than what we did in St. Johnsbury because of occupancy, the type of individuals that would be housed there. And with the, and so the new ad is also for this facility, which no one really ever contemplated. What is the state's partnership with doing a youth stabilization treatment center? And so, and there were a lot of discussions. There's a high expectation, a very costly expectation when you start this out of what the state's going to contribute to the community. So I will share with this group, I've been talking with with Secretary Clark, because I believe we need to put some guidelines as an administration around when do we engage, how do we set up a committee with the community, and then we have a consistent way in documentation to work with these communities, because I will tell you, it's all over the place. Some communities want it right now. They want the agreement signed before we even get a zoning change. And then, everyone's been a little bit different. The others are like, we are here, we will work with you on it, but they really want a bigger commitment from BGS or from DOC or from DCF. And we're not the ones who are able to give that large commitment, but we can set up the process in which you do it. And that's something we've got to do better. And I just really said a lot. So I'll stop, I'll pause.
Yeah, I actually appreciate the approach of increasing consistency and approach and, some guidance to communities about what the state's role is, what the state will do, what the state won't do, what are the parameters around that, when that occurs, all of that. So thank you for undertaking that.
You're welcome.
I can follow up question, and I mean, I appreciate the approach that you are trying to take, but does BGS or does the state have the authority to override the community's objection? And just proceed. I'm not saying that's the best approach, but I'm just kind of curious if where there's a authority is.
So I'm not an attorney, but I will tell you the statute is very clear on the authority that you give towns and cities for their zoning and local permitting. And that's the process in which we are engaged in, and we are respectfully following that.
And that's why you're trying to find a place where the zoning is already not going to be, doesn't have to be changed.
I think any zoning is probably going to have to be changed. I think with working with the developers and their proposal, hoping to have a better awareness of a community that would welcome and engage and want to be a part of this. And I think that's, we haven't, I wasn't here, but I think we've chosen the sites and just sort of gone forth and filed the applications. I think we're trying to get a read of a better understanding of communities that would embrace a partnership with the state. And that's where we will, the developers know their communities.
And that's the direction you're working in right now, just no replacement.
Correct, and in the RFP.
That if you do a design build, the developer owns the property.
Yep.
And the developer knows the community, and the community knows the developer, and the goal is the thinking that it will be easier. And there might be a level of trust from the community because they know the developer when they go through the permitting.
And this is a developer's business. They're a partner in this. This is what they do. And BGS took on the zoning, and we're good at what we do. But I think we need a stronger partner in that, and we'll be at the table. And that I think is, really, really important. And I think instead of us trying to work through this, month after month, year after year, a developer in partnership is going to say, it's not working. It's not going to work, right? So what's what's the next step and what's the alternative? And your developers are parts of community. And I think that's really important. And the other thing, just so you know, the agreement that we're looking at is, again, we would lease always with an option to buy and to buy out, and part of their bid will have those costs in that. And there will be a financial evaluation done on all of these proposals. So it's not just programming.
It's probably a rhetorical question. Are there towns and municipalities that have already zoned for this type of state facility, whether it's juvenile facility or whether it's a women's a DOC correctional facility? We don't know. You don't have the answer, but I mean, does it make sense at some point for the legislature to have this discussion to have towns sort out ahead of time, so you don't go through this every single time a state facility is being placed?
So I think there's two questions there. And I don't think it's rhetorical either. So I would say that I think as we move forward, excuse me, the question, should the legislature get involved? I'm gonna let you noodle over that one. But every community is different. So any place we have an existing facility, but every permit and every condition is different. So St. Albans, right? We have the ability to build a correctional facility in St. Albans. But when you peel back the onion, we can only build within the fence line that we agreed to. So while we own land there, we can't go outside of that fence line. So that's a condition. In Springfield, we pretty much fenced in all of the property with a little bit of exception. And I just want to give this where there was an expectation on some property transferring to the town, and we have to manage the deer yards, but we have space designed within the fence that we could expand. Windsor has been an outstanding partner with the state for hundreds of years. Windsor, we have that ability, but there's been long-standing discussions and agreements about what do we do with Windsor and how do we have a positive impact on the community? So I'm actually going through all of them. Essex, where we went, we were asking for an expansion. So the property at Woodside, we have approval. So what we had sought from Essex was expanding the conditional use to the other state-owned property. And that was for the women's facility. So outside of that, I don't think it's something that is in very many communities' zoning policies that they've already identified that we would welcome some type of correctional facility. And if I may, I see my deputy commissioner over there. Remember Ethan? Over there. So if I can, Madam Chair, turn to her.
The commissioner said it's really dependent on the town, and they can have different zoning designations that could potentially allow for whether it's correctional facilities or other, like they might
Hospital.
allow potential use in that area, but it's really, again, on a case by case basis where we don't have inventory, at least BGS isn't aware of the inventory on a statewide map where we could point out all the business we could potentially go at the outset.
So I want to move this along because I know
Yeah.
the DCF folks on the screen. We have the deputy commissioner as well as the high-end system of care director. So I will leave it up to you two to weigh in. I want to give you the opportunity to weigh in on this. So whoever wants to go first.
Oh, I can start. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I'm not feeling well, so I didn't want to share my germs with all of you.
Thank you.
Exactly. So good afternoon, Chair Amons and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Erica Radke, and I serve as Deputy Commissioner for the Family Services Division of DCF. And as you mentioned, I have here with me Tyler Allen, Director of FSD's High-End System of Care Unit. We really do appreciate you having us here to talk about the Green Mountain Youth Campus and to give you an update on our efforts to expand our capacity for crisis stabilization for youth in DCF custody. So as you may recall, you've heard a lot about what we've been doing with the Green Mountain Youth Campus. And we had originally planned to site it in Virgins, but as Commissioner Manoli stated, we really did determine that there were zoning barriers at that location that just really made timely completion impossible. So that was a setback, but it did give us an opportunity to strengthen our process. And we've incorporated those lessons into this new RFP, particularly around the areas of site vetting and feasibility, because we really do want to move forward with greater certainty with the process to make sure we get it right this time. And the need for this project absolutely remains immediate. Every month that there's delay, that means that there are youth in temporary or out-of-state settings that are less effective or more costly for the state. And this project, what we're trying to do with Green Mountain Youth is to help ensure that Vermont youth can have the treatment that they receive closer to home and in clinically appropriate settings. There's been so much work that's gone into refining the design since this project began. We were working with our design team, BGS, and a group of stakeholders that developed a model that's really much more functional, therapeutic, as well as being more cost efficient. The current plan has 6 separate but integrated structures for stabilization, treatment, education, vocation and recreation, administrative and wellness functions, and dining and receiving. And this separation really allows us to tailor programming to maintain safety and to operate more efficiently over time. But it also does support a more trauma informed campus style environment, one that emphasizes healing and personal growth, which we believe are just essential to making long lasting change for youth so that they can move on to young adulthood in a positive space. Other improvements include expanding our outdoor space, adding parking capacity, and a design that relies less on perimeter fencing and more of a thoughtful layout that relies on natural sight lines to maintain safety and security. And the choices were about more than infrastructure. It's really about improving outcomes for youth by reducing placement disruptions, shortening length of stay, and helping young people to return to family and community more successfully, which is really our primary goal.
And can I just add to that, Madam Chair, that, in the programming, I think what's really important for this committee to understand, and also the committees on institutions, in the past, you've allocated money for us to do design and to work on the programming. And while we're going forward with a different site and we're exploring, we do now have a design that really reflects some of the important elements on programming that the Deputy Commissioner just highlighted. So we're not starting that over. We've taken the investment and the money, and that's carrying forward. And we've gotten stronger and better at articulating what those programming needs are.
We do have a question from a committee member, Wendy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question about just the youth facility. And I'm wondering if there is an existing facility somewhere that the Deputy Commissioner or someone else could point to as an example facility, because I think it really helps to have a vision that has some meat on it to understand what the goal is.
Absolutely. I'll start off with Tyler. I'm sure you have some additional information to add. When I'm looking at what's important for us for this facility, there's a great facility in Philadelphia. Their commissioner is someone that I've known personally, and I've heard a lot about the work that they've done. And it's, of course, it's this much bigger facility, have a lot more kids, but the way it's set up in terms of focusing on that holistic approach, having education, having physicians, just having so much right on site with a real emphasis on treatment as opposed to detention has been really important, and I've been using that sort of as a guiding light for me for what is important in what we're trying to incorporate in our facility. Tyler, I'm sure you have something to add.
Well, I wouldn't offer a concrete example of a place. Otherwise, we have toured some additional facilities that are treatment programs that also have a locked feature in them. Another one in Pennsylvania as well we toured. Again, these facilities are much larger. I would add, however, the design team that worked on this, that was brought in by the previous builders, included experts in the field of juvenile justice and youth detention. And so they were understanding what we're trying to do is much different in Vermont than what's widely been used for juvenile justice before. So we are building something to some degree that's new. And part of it is we're trying to keep our footprint as small as possible. And often youth facilities are built larger and more institutional historically. And there is a trend towards making more home-like environments, incorporating elements of that. But with Vermont, we have a much smaller population to serve, and so our programs are much smaller. So it's modeled in part more after treatment programs, and then the hardening is less about cement structures and more about finishes that are resistant, more hardware resistant. And of course, we do have an existing secure program right now. It is not an optimal layout, but we are trying to learn lessons from that and how to maintain youth safely in an environment that is not hardened in more traditional ways.
Thank you, Tyler. Go ahead.
No, sorry. At one point in time, when you presented to this committee, you were presenting a program that had a pretty wide age range. We expressed some concern about, the younger youth and the older youth being served in the same program. And could you, and maybe you said this and I missed it, what is the age range that you're looking at now?
Would you like me to answer that, Deputy Commissioner?
Yes.
So the age range where we last left off is up to the age of 18. Where that became a bit controversial is the idea of the inclusion of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, or maybe even above. And while I think there is a recognition that those might be a juvenile justice population, that became problematic. Stakeholder feedback kind of came back on that as well of concerns, including from youth who have spent time in similar level facilities, concerns that youth over the age of 18 might be disruptive to youth that are younger. So the populations right now, largely, I think would be between the ages of 12 and 18 years old.
Does that mean 18-year-olds are included or not?
18-year-olds would not be included as we've looked at it right now. We did do
18 to 17.
up to 17, including 17-year-olds,
Including
up to the
So it'd be
18th
12.
birthday.
12 to 17,
13 to
or
17.
is it 13 to 17?
I think it's at the start of the 12th year up to the age of 17. I will double check that and make sure that number is correct, but I believe we were saying at the start of from the 12th birthday up until the 18th birthday.
And what capacity are you looking at? How many youth would you see being here at any one time?
Well, this program would house a crisis stabilization program, which has 8 beds in it, so we could serve up to 8 on the stabilization side of it, and then it has a separate treatment program that is a 6-bed program. So the most that could be occupying the program at any time is 14.
And
The
that
2
would-
programs.
And those 14 beds would then take the 4 beds you have at Middlesex offline.
Yes.
That is correct.
Correct.
Just wanted to be clear on that. So we got a lot more questions. I also want to make sure we have time for DOC to talk about the women's facility.
Just a quick question, because I know we're trying to get into the design, the planning and everything else before we have placed the land. But are you looking to reduce the number of out-of-state placements? I know we've talked about this before. Just a quick answer, you don't have to go into detail.
Absolutely. That's definitely a part of this. Even though with the numbers being this low, it does make it a bit harder to reduce out-of-state placements. But that is the goal, is to reduce out-of-state placements as well as to reduce having staffing in alternative sites as well.
If I may just add as well, the 6-bed treatment program, the intention there is youth who are currently going to a psychiatric residential treatment facility level of care due to conduct challenges. Largely, those are often youth who go out of state, and the intention is and not just out of state regionally, but farther away out of state. Those are youth that I could see remaining in Vermont and being served by the Green Mountain Youth Campus.
And the important thing for us is when you have a youth that can remain in state, it's just that much easier for their support system to come to visit them, and that will help them, we believe, ultimately in their treatment progress.
So one more
No,
question,
that
Mark.
answers my question.
Okay, because I really we're looking at the time, and I really want to move on to the DOC Women's Replacement Facility.
I'm staying.
Yeah, I know you're. Thank you very much, DCF folks. I had you come first because I know we were running late, might have more of a time constraint.
Thank you very much.
So let's shift to where we are with the Women's Replacement Facility, and DOC can join BGS.
Yes.
Sure, BGS, welcome, and Commissioner Correct, welcome.
So
So where are we?
So I'm going to do an overview. I think then we'll get into some programming. And so let's talk about the women's reentry and correctional facility. You know, I want to say, first of all, to the committee that, and this sort of goes to Senator Lyons', I think, earlier comment, or I'm making a connection with it. The state owns property. We own property throughout the state. The immediately assumption that it's more affordable and that it may save us money to go to a piece of state-owned property, we shouldn't do that. What we need to do is we have to explore the feasibility of that property. And so we, BGS and the Department of Corrections went down this road, and we looked at, we're going to focus on state-owned land, and the state-owned land is going to give us a savings, and there could be a cost savings to it. One of the things that I learned before the commissioner joined us is that we identified property, but we didn't make an investment in the site analysis of that property. We didn't say, does it have sewer and water? Does the town or city have the capacity within their sewer plant? What is the hill structure? What is the soil contents, right? So we spent a good amount of time, and my department will do more investigation as we go down. And we focused on 2 pieces of property in Essex. And we worked closely with AHS, and site 1 was the preferred site, as we just looked at it from a very high level. This summer, I said, because we heard Essex, the community of Essex is saying, why are you asking us to give you conditional use on 2 pieces of property? Does that mean if we give it to you, you're going to come back and build a men's prison? Does that mean if we permit these 2 sites that you're just going to come in and do what you want? And that wasn't our intent. I think that was an impression. That was a concern. And the site that we had chosen, we as commissioners quickly learned that their preferred site was site what we call number 2, which was the River Road site. And doing the analysis that we did this summer, the River Road site was actually the most feasible site to build on. And it was in an industrial area. So we learned some lessons from that, and I just want to share that with the committee. But, you know, as we go forward and you look at all of the inventory of the land, you might see acres, you might see many, many things, but that doesn't mean it's the best site for the purpose. So I just want to say that in general, because we talked about those 2 sites. You know, for probably a year, BGS was being asked about going to 1 site. I wish we had probably addressed it sooner. I want to say the commissioner and I met in September, I believe, with the community in Essex. They provided us a list of 16 questions, very detailed questions. We went to the community meeting. We responded in public to all of the information that we asked. We both felt it was a really, really good meeting and an engagement with the planning team. And basically in October, but I want to just go back to that meeting. While we addressed everything, This is the same, it doesn't matter if it's the other facility or this. The same common theme is trust, and the same common theme is what are you going to contribute to our community? This is a lot for us to take this on. This increases capacity on sewer systems. This increases traffic patterns. It might be no sidewalks, needing sidewalks, all of the things your communities think about in a planning meeting. And I'm just bringing you back to, that's the piece that we're really resetting on, and how do we give some guidance to that? But I also want to say, I attended, I think my first meeting, I had been BGS commissioner for 2 days, maybe 3 days. And I went to a community member, a meeting in Essex, and then again with the commissioner. And, I just have to, I'm so honest, I am so impressed with these local community members who choose to serve on these boards, because there's a lot of concern and opposition. There's support and opposition on a women's correctional facility. And they've managed through that process very, very well. But it's difficult. And I think at some point in time, when does the community say enough is enough? And I don't know if you agree with that, but I'm just sharing that with you because I feel that's part of it. It doesn't matter what we promise, how much we can bring to the table, enough is enough. And we don't want to be in your community. We don't want this type of facility in our community. Would you like to add to that, Commissioner?
I agree with Commissioner Manoli. I thought it was a very good meeting. I obviously hadn't been part of the earlier ones. I was told that there had been certain obstacles and concerns raised by the Essex Planning Commission. And I really it was very early in my time, and I said, look, I think this would be a great thing for us to get some yardage on. And I frankly thought that the meeting went quite well. I thought reducing it to one site, being clear about why we had changed the site, acknowledging in fact that it was really their pressure on some level that had encouraged the additional surveys of the sites, and had really said, okay, you're right. It's only one site, and it's a different site than we initially thought. Site 2, not site 1. I thought all of that went quite a ways to developing some trust with them. I also was quite heartened by the fact that sometime towards the end of the meeting, despite a public comment that came after our answering the many questions they had posed, and doing so as forthrightly as we could, they had a public comment section. It was a long public comment section. It was a heated public comment section. It was dominated largely by people who were not Essex residents, who were speaking about prison abolition more than opposition to this particular facility or its siting. And there were those who were residents of Essex who were speaking quite strongly as to their support for such a facility, including, I think, some really important Essex residents, people that work in this, not for DOC or for state government, but who work in this sphere and recognize the need from a really boots on the ground level. And so in the midst of all that, the Planning Commission stated towards the end, look, let's be clear. We are here to discuss what a landowner, a private landowner, can do with its land. This is not about whether or not prisons are a good or a bad thing that would deserve to be abolished. That left me with a great deal of hope that we just had a great meeting. And I was really shocked by the decision that came down. And I think that in some ways, the second site is closer to a residential section of Essex Junction, or Essex Town rather. It's closer to where the Amazon facility that I believe you mentioned, Representative Wood, had been sort of fought back against. And what those dynamics of residents who are concerned about a facility like this, the dynamics of people who had just successfully pushed back on a development that they were not enthusiastic about. What level that played in I don't know, but most of that wasn't in the room the night of the meeting. So whatever that was perhaps after the fact, as the Planning Commission undertook what is its obligation to sort of understand what its own residents want. But I was disappointed. I was very disappointed.
Yeah.
And I'm disappointed in part because, this facility in South Burlington is just a few years younger than I am. And it is used 24/7. It is showing its age in really significant ways. It's showing its age in ways that are really bad for the women who are inside it, and including, flooding issues and things like that. And it's not what we as a state and what we as a department want to be able to provide for the women who are inside. We want to be able to say, with the pride that I think is a pride that Vermont really enjoys, we're at the cutting edge. We're doing something that is forward thinking and that is the best practice as we currently know it. And we're going to do it in a way that allows us to have the flexibility to develop according to best practices as we may know them 10 years from now or 15 years from now. And this current facility cannot do those things. It just can't. We need to build a new facility in order for that to have those kinds of flexibilities and also to have that kind of goal around what's being done well where. Many people on this committee, certainly on the corrections committee, know about Maine and the facility in Maine and its great successes. We know that there's a model that we see in other parts of the world, Europe and Scandinavia particularly, that have different ways of doing carceral rehabilitation. And we want to be able to have a facility that is really lends itself towards all that. How do we get that when we cannot find communities that are properly sited for us? Because the commissioner's right. Windsor has a multi-century connection to this and might be a location, but that is not where we need to be if we're going to have a single site for women in the state. It's got to be somewhere closer to this corridor, preferably Chittenden County. How do we do that? How do we make certain that we work with communities, that we allay their concerns, but that we also can actually have something that we all need, even though some of us may not want? That's a big open question for us.
And I just really want to jump in and sort
Yeah,
of follow
please.
up in on that. And it really kind of brings us back to one of the questions in the beginning that the Senator Lyons asked about with the land. And I don't know the answer, but, again, the state owns a lot of land. I think that even with this project, I don't think anyone's ever said we wouldn't consider buying land. This is definitely a facility that we want to build and own, because I think of the longevity of it. You're building that replacement. This is not a good design develop type of project. But going back to, I think all of you brought this up, even you, Representative Woods, but as you were speaking, Commissioner, it's like, how do we communicate in a partnership from the state the importance of this facility? Corrections isn't choosing to house these people, right? They come from the judicial side of government, and they're sentenced, and that's what it is. We need to provide a safe, healthy space that meets their programming and their services. And while South Burlington has gone through many, many changes, the facility, you've all seen pictures of it, but doesn't even meet some of the programming needs in what they're trying to address.
No.
So it's not maybe just the land. I think it's knowing all voices on the importance of this program, because right now it's the commissioner of BGS and the commissioner of DOC that's out talking to these communities. And I don't think we're enough.
We certainly
I think
don't.
we're a lot, but I don't think we're enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think we certainly, and in that respect, certainly we can benefit from any number of voices that want to sort of add
Yeah.
theirs to ours. We certainly don't want to have a purchase of land then run into the exact same situations that we're running into now. That, of course, is a risk. How do we know that if we find the best site that you can imagine with regard to its geographic layout and with regard to it's already on city sewer, et cetera, but that it then engenders the same kind of groundswell of opposition from neighbors, that we wouldn't run into this same issue. And now we've actually spent an additional $200-300 million on the land. It's not going to be that much. I just threw that one out. So I wasn't pegging myself to a real number, but it was $100 million to purchase this lot. And now we can't do with it what we need. That's a real danger. And not to relitigate the arguments that we made to the Essex Planning Commission, but we had, and long before I joined the process, our partners in South Burlington, from the city manager to the chief of police to others, came forward and said, this is a great neighbor. We don't have, this is not a quote unquote headache. This is not something that I think is not unreasonable for certain people to fear. Oh, you're going to have a prison. What if people break out? Who visits the prison? What if when you let them out, what happens to them? Do they just wander around committing more crimes because they have just been sort of abandoned by you out the door? Those are all understandable fears from neighbors, none of which are borne out by the actual experience of residents and neighbors of the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility. So how do we get all that out, and how are we more effective at trying to have a clear set of voices and rationales for why we need this, and working on the next, whether that's continuing to try to work with Essex, we would like that. We would love for there to be a shift there, or whether that is identifying other properties someplace else that we then sort of start off again from.
That's sort of where I am. Where are we now? Are we back at square one? Are we starting over? Because you do have authority by previous capital bills. You do have authority to state on land first. And I'm intrigued by the feasibility piece, because that's not included in that. And then if there isn't any state land, you are given the authority to purchase, and there is money there that you could use to purchase.
Yes.
So are we just back to the drawing board?
So where we are, we got together. So I just want this committee to know, and the public, we meet every 2 weeks. I mean, we are very engaged as a working group, and I think that's really, really important. So we met a couple of weeks ago and we listed all of the options. We haven't decided, we haven't moved that forward. We wanted to explore all of our existing property that is identified for correctional use. And that's why I know, about St. Albans and Windsor and Springfield and south of Burlington. We also did we didn't do a formal land search, but my deputy actually, working with property management, went out to different developers to see, hey, is there any other land available? And there is. I will say to this committee, I'm looking forward to the type of response. I'm jumping back to the youth facility that we get in November, because that's really going to help us even understand, because it's the same issue. It's the same issue on the zoning, how we could apply that. South Burlington, as the commissioner said, we've been good neighbors. We've contributed to that community. There's been benefits. We haven't picked a community. We've stayed in a radius to respect the state employees, because there are some requirements around, when you move a facility and you go out of I think it's 31 miles or 30-mile radius. We also know that currently for the women's facility program, there's an established community base that's helping with reentry. So all of those pieces are just as important as the land. So we end up staying in the Chittenden County area.
Do you need any modification in language in terms of what authority we have given BGS in terms of land? I mean, one thought is, would you work with a potential owner of a property to have that owner work with, before we purchase it, to have that owner along with the state work with the local community for permitting?
Well, I mean, I think we probably have authority, Madam Chair, that we would enter into a sales and purchase agreement with that condition. I think we have that right now. We just haven't decided, do we go out and do an RFP? And do we go out and do a search? You know, I will say Essex is a great location. It's not the best site. From a construction standpoint, I just want you to know, what we learned is there wasn't capacity to connect to the sewer. They've got a whole other process going on with that, so we had to, in the last few months, say, could we build and do our own septic? The septic system on that site, you know, there's not a lot of growth, because there's regulations on all sorts of things. So I don't even know if there's even a better piece of property, because I think the language said focus on state-owned first. And this is the other thing I just want to say, some of this land that we're focused on was bought with federal dollar. And no one said, do we have to repay the transportation fund? Because
That's swirling around.
and actually with one of the sites, we learned there would have to be. So there was going to be a cost, even though we thought there was no cost, there actually was probably a higher cost with going that route.
So do you think come January and February this next year during the session, there'll be some direction that you'll be going in, or is it?
Well, I'd like to believe there is. I mean, Commissioner, how about you?
Yes, we would very much.
Put money aside.
Yes.
Do this. Now, there's gonna be a lot of pressure for that money, and we could pull it.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not.
The problem, as you know, Madam Chair, with your years of experience, it's an expensive project, and we were talking $100 million to build this type of facility. Because it's not an office building, and it's, think about it as a city within a community, because of how you provide 24/7 services for that. So I think the goal was getting money, all of us, you know, infused. When you take it away, the cost just goes up, right? And we come back. So I think you're going to be discussing it. I'd like us to be in a place where we have a really clear path set forward on where we're going and how we're approaching it. I think we are also prepared that if we need additional language or modification to language, we will be before your committee to have this discussion. And really, I would say to this committee, and to your other committees of jurisdiction, you know, let's not make it complicated, but if you have ideas or thoughts, bring them forward to us, and, you know, because we have a good working group.
Yes.
It's not really, I guess it's sort of a broad question, not really expecting an answer, but, you know, with the sort of ongoing issues of being able to cite programs, you know, that we've continued to experience. And, you know, we do have some things already existing in statute around zoning and community zoning where they can't zone out certain things in communities. And I'm just wondering if you have any, you know, particular legislative ideas about how to continue to give communities voice, and at the same time, maybe have more authority to move forward with a project.
So there has been some discussion, and I don't know if we're bringing anything forward or not, but we have talked about some policy, maybe to, for the legislature to consider, or changes on giving us a little bit more leeway on property that we own. But I also know that, you know, community, it doesn't make a difference if it's property we own or property that's for sale in a community.
Yeah.
It's really about the, on the land, it's
about the
really,
end use. I think
Yeah,
it's
it's
about the
about-
use of whether or not it's something that has a sort of an emergent public safety. And I don't mean to get into the question of public safety that VSEA Rep. Howard raised, but the idea of what does this contribute with regard to a critical piece of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
and I think that there is an element there is there a place or is there room for exceptions or for streamlining for the sake of work that has that criticality to it.
Yeah, if a corrections facility is condemned, have to take the folks who are there.
Yes, golly, Senator, I don't want
I'm
to
so
contemplate that.
thinking that the women's facility should be condemned the way it looks.
Or that we're sending people, youth, thousands of miles away because we
Yeah.
don't have a place for them here in Vermont. Yeah.
And I think that's, just the, I've had opportunity with working with all of you, but I've spent many years in the institution. I spent many years in corrections and in institutions, and it's prioritization. And you all, as legislators, have quite a few balls to juggle on that priority, but, so while I think we are identifying these facilities are extremely critical to our inventory and to our programming, we're managing one to make it affordable. Well, it's not, it costs more to do design development. But that's to help advance so you can make room for the funding of the women's facility.
I can say that the House Institutions Committee started this work in 2016, 2017 to replace the gym. So it did not come from the fifth floor. Did not come from our counterparts in the Senate. It came out of the House Corrections and Institutions Committee and put in some initial money for BGS to start a bit of design thinking, so replacing the limits. And that, I believe, was back in 2017. You're what, 8 years?
And I think I just want to remind everyone that when you look at the time frame and you think about the cost of this, and I'm just, I think you all need to, this is why you're here serving the state. Once we get the money, you're looking at a facility of this type and we get all of our permitting, you're looking at a 3-year construction time frame. So if we've got one permitting process that takes us a year to get through, which is that local zoning change. And then, because I think, they can take up to a year. And then we have the other permitting process, which is, I believe, a year. That's 2 years, plus we got to get the funding and then we got to construct. So
7 years out.
5 to 7, if we can advance and speed this up in some way, because your other facility isn't changing.
No, as I understand it, and I may be incorrect, and I know that there's members of this committee who may have more insight into it than I. The state police, for example, are basically on a rolling sort of planned rehabilitation / replacement of their various barracks. And so it's understood you're going to get 20, maybe at the outmost 40 years out of a facility like that. It's probably closer to the 20 end. And we have a rolling expectation of, all right, it's time to work on this one. We are in a very similar spot. You know very well, ma'am, that our newest facility is 25 years old. And we do put a lot of wear and tear on these facilities. But the fact that we don't have something along those lines, and it's a much bigger question, of course. A barracks is 15 to 25 million, and these are much larger costs, as the commissioner just said. But the notion of having some sort of schedule for that says here, we are going to think about this one, we can project or prognosticate about end of life for this particular facility. How do we make certain that we're ready to go with a new one? Because it is a challenge. For example, if we were able to use the South Burlington site, and we don't believe that we are based on our current desires for programming and how a structure like this would need to be built and shaped and laid out. But if we could use the South Burlington site, and it's zoned and we have all those hurdles already cleared, you can't the people are there. You can't move them someplace else while you rehab or tear down and reconstruct that site. So these are things that we do have to think about. You really do need to have a place into which you can move the people that's ready Not just that you say, well,
Well, that's costly too.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
that's,
is.
that's a cost that you absolutely,
Yeah.
wouldn't expect. And I just want to say one other thing to the committee, and it's really building off what the commissioner just said. When you talk about long-term, and it actually goes to Steve Howard's earlier comments, when he's talking about the air condition. These are our, from buildings and general services, these are our toughest facilities to maintain. They are used 24/7, the bathrooms, the plumbing, the heating. It doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And they are our hardest, and this is not a negative, facility to work in and to get contractors to work in, because they have to move individuals, there's many background checks and security levels, and so we are getting less and less people bidding on these projects, which delays some of our repairs. And I think some people just right now, they don't have a need to work in correctional facilities, where maybe 10 years ago, that was probably, a lot of what the work was, and they were large systems. So that's difficult too. So as we continue to go down this road of what do we do with these facilities, I just need the committees to know that it's harder and harder to get some of the work done.
So we need to move on.
Yep.
We're talking about some of the inmate population. This is a good segue. I want to thank you both for doing that. I want to thank DCF as well for this update. A little longer than what we had planned. We really have bombed the schedule this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to go into the next item, which is with Judge Zone as well as the Commissioner of Corrections, doing a little deeper dive in terms of the inmate population data. The pretrial supervision piece, we're going to put that off to our next meeting in November.
okay.
Running a little
take
late. So Commissioner.
Yes.
All yours.
What is it that we prepared a small presentation. I think it's actually been augmented by one additional slide that had to do, I think, Haley is working on it here in the room. So if it didn't get in, that's on me. But there's one additional slide that she has that shows, we'll just jump to that one first, I think. Just to cap off part of our conversation from this morning. This is since I came in on August 15th. The day-to-day population for Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility, and the orange/yellow at the bottom is the daily detainee population of immigration detainees.
Those are the immigration. So as of today, we are 164.
Mhm.
And how many of those are detainees?
Today, I believe there are 2.
No, but total. Of the 164 folks, how many are sentenced?
Oh, that kind of detainee. I thought you meant immigration detainee, and my apologies. 75 today. Is that your guidance?
I took the calculations this morning. I came up with 164 total, 12 federal detainees, 77 state detainees, which would leave 75 cents.
So last time it was about 71, 72 state.
Thank you, sir.
So we wanted to do a little deeper dive in terms, particularly of the women's population, in terms of what are the driving forces there for their increase in detainees as well. As Martin, you asked about this, and bail, that was the other piece of this. We wanted to do a deeper dive into this.
Yeah, I mean, this is still, it doesn't really tell us enough of the story. I mean, it would be helpful to understand as far as, I mean, the detainees are definitely what's driving the population. I think that's fairly clear.
So we can forward to the, I think, the second to last slide.
Yes.
Right, so, but of those detainees, I'm very curious of why that number's been going up. Is how many of these people are being held without bail? What are the bail amounts? We have seen that before. I think that zoning has provided us that, but I don't remember if it was for the female population for all of them, but
Actually, I got that this morning from Jordan, with the Department of Corrections. Currently, it looks like current detainees with bail amounts at Chittenden under $1,000 are 10, between 1,000 and 99.99 or 15, 10,000 from 10,000 up to 900 to 99,999. There's 11. There's 2 in the 100,000s. There's 27 hold without bail.
27 home, okay. So for those, the lower level or the smaller amount bail, I mean, it's also helpful to understand, are these individuals that are being held because they don't have an expungible misdemeanor, or maybe, or are they individuals that under our law that we passed last biennium are now being held on bail? No, you probably don't have that.
I think you'd have to actually look at each case to understand that. I think it's safe to say that the statutory changes that were made to afford an opportunity for a judge who believes there is a risk of flight from prosecution to impose bail where previously you couldn't, and to go above $200. I think that certainly is something that could be a driving force. Again, I haven't gone and done a deep dive. I think the fact that we're actually moving ahead, with more cases, and then we're having more failures to appear when someone is then brought in and bail is imposed.
Right. So we're gonna see that with the accountability docket, presumably.
So pilot docket, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if people are not showing up, the courts, I would assume, are more likely to hold them on or to impose bail, and they may be held on bail because they're not showing up. And I think, and a question for you, are you seeing that judges are treating that a little bit differently now? Because I think that what we've seen before is somebody doesn't show up, or at least this is anecdotally what I've heard from various people dealing with this, that anecdotally that somebody doesn't show up, there's a warrant for the arrest, they're arrested, but they're just cited it to another date in court. They're not like brought right in and they have a bail hearing. Is that changing? And I understand that seems that will purposely change for this docket that we're talking about. But have you seen that change in how courts and prosecutors are dealing with those cases now? Outside of that.
When you say change, what the judges are doing is applying the facts to the law. And if someone comes in, I think what really is happening sometimes is if you have someone that's missed court once or twice, and that's the example that you would give, the court would say, okay, we'll get you back and bring you in and move on. What I think is happening is you're getting people who may have had 1 or 2 who are now having 3, 4, or 5 failures to appear. And at that point, the court is saying, you're a risk. And I think that could be generated. But again, I have to go and look at each of the cases to really understand, in case A, why was this individual, at what point in the process was bail imposed? Right.
So the one other question is how much churn there is, or another way of putting it, how long are individuals being held there of this detainee population? Is there a large number of them that are there for a while? What's the average?
I don't have that number.
DOC have
Yeah, we have to go and look at each of the cases to see. I don't know if DOC keeps track of someone's first moment coming in and how long they're there. I do think there is data on that. I just don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, because this would be helpful as well. I'm all for the expedited arraignment docket. That's what I like to call it instead of the accountability court. But anyway, the expedited arraignment docket. So we're putting resources in for individuals who are repeat offenders are probably not being held because they're low-level crimes and they seem to be around. Maybe some of them are. But we've decided to put a lot of resources towards that element. And is that going to impact, or maybe our decision should be instead that we should be putting those resources towards those individuals who are being deprived of their liberty pre-trial. These are folks that are being detained and haven't had their cases heard yet. And I think what would inform that is if we have any kind of trend information as far as how long are people being detained. I know that it's not in front of us, but it's like, I guess I'm a little frustrated that we've asked for kind of this information over the past few months, and we still don't seem to have the information that we could use to really understand this, particularly with respect to trends. And I think it's not just the number of detainees, it's under what circumstances they're being detained and how long they're being detained, I think could inform what we're trying to do.
I'm looking at a list, for instance, of the multi-5 plus from Chittenden. It was prepared, I believe, by Mr. Waite, the prosecutor. The court has its list, but he also prepared one. And a number of individuals there, it does show, hold without bail. There's another, the next one, held $5,000 bail. So there's a number of people who are still being held with bail under this category, under who fit the 5 plus.
Right.
So it is capturing the categories of people who are both out and who are in. And so the prioritization of people who are in, that's part of this docket also. It's, as we know, this is the challenge. I think I sat here last month and we talked about, you know, what do you give priority to? The person who has the misdemeanors who is being held on bail, or the case where someone might be out, but you have victims who are waiting for years for the case to be resolved. And so this pilot docket actually allows that to be taken into account. So Judge Maley and Judge Klein, when Judge Maley's not there, have the ability to say, okay, in this docket, we're going to give priority to the people who are incarcerated to try to see if we can move those cases. So that is not, this docket does not exclude that as a potential consideration.
I guess it just goes back to my just fundamental question that we've been working on for a while, and that's just having ongoing information that helps inform our decisions. And we're kind of just dipping down and not very deeply. So not sure how to resolve that.
But it's true also for the male population, when you look at the detainee population for males, it's now up to 520.
Good.
And our usual average is around 350. So those same questions could be asked of the males as well. But what's more alarming is in the women's facility, half of your population there are detainees. And that's not the case for the males. So it's bumping up, but half of your women there are detainees. And that goes into when you're looking at replacing the women's facility, what type of facility do you build? Is that a detainee population is very different from a sentence population that's very different than a reentry population. So where would the committee like to go on this conversation? I know it's getting late, people are getting tired. Do we need more information?
Well, I mean, just for ongoing, I think we do, and maybe, I don't know if this committee or standing committee needs to dig in on how, and I appreciate the Department of Corrections online site that you now have, but there still seems to be some pretty important information that's missing from that, including with respect to the detainee population. But maybe that will take a little digging in more deeply and even talking offline.
So we have a question online, Wendy?
Yeah, it's more of a just reiteration. I think we have these people in our custody. I think it's not unreasonable to want to have information. The information exists. I think we should get the information that we've asked for.
I would agree with that. The issue for me is how productive is it for us? I'm talking about this committee, and I'm going to Martin's comment about standing committees. And maybe it's an opportunity for standing committees to dive a little bit deeper in the type of crime, the type of individual. yeah. It's a lot of information, and I'm hearing what you're saying about who the person is and what they've done. How much, it's a lot. I
So
just feel like it's a lot.
and where do we get that information? Because when we've asked, DOC will say, well, you gotta go to the courts. And then the courts say, well, DOC has that information. So where do we go to get that information?
Right, or you can go to BPS as well, so
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
so
the other
it's, yeah, and this is something we started dealing with the bill, it's either H 409 or 410, I don't remember which, looking at our recidivism definition.
Yeah, every 3 years.
And it's, our recidivism, our definition makes absolutely zero sense as far as tracking repeat offenders, it just doesn't. But we're trying to figure out, well, who holds the data, who should be providing a realistic recidivist data, and we're still working on that, we will be working on that, maybe we'll expand to look at some of this other data needs as well.
What's the IT system like that allows for that?
What I just.
Oh.
Anything else on this? 'Cause
We will get you whatever data that you would like that we can generate, and as you're speaking, I have some ideas on
So maybe we could do this for a November meeting,
some spreadsheets.
November meeting, and you'll be up in there.
Oh, he's gonna be.
So I know we put off the pretrial supervision, but I can't help but ask this particular question for the pilot project in Chittenden County, where we do have the pretrial supervision program as a pilot up in Orleans County. 600,000 that came out, that we put in the budget for FY25. So if you're gonna implement this in a pilot project in Chittenden County, are you pulling the money, that 600,000?
Yes,
To Chittenden
Yes.
and not doing it in Orleans?
yes.
So you're moving it to another county. And when we did the pilot in Orleans, you needed to get the okay from this committee to do that. The legislature was part of that decision.
That's your fiscal committee.
You know, it was us. Because we talked about that last year, DOC made the proposal. That's in the language that we put in. It was the,
Shall we make the decision that we think Chittenden is great, nunc pro tunc? No, is it nunc pro tunc?
Pro tunc.
That's my favorite Latin phrase.
Oh,
I mean, I just want to put that.
What does that mean?
Yeah, to translate that, yeah, what does it mean?
Judge?
What it essentially means is you do something today and you're backdated.
Oh, okay.
It becomes legally effective as of the prior date.
It's as if they came and they asked us permission 2 months ago or whatever, a month
I mean,
ago.
that's
We
a-
said then, yes, but we'll say twice, yes.
I'm certainly sorry and will throw myself on the sword as far as not knowing that that was even a permission that we needed to grant. This was an executive priority and a shift on a program that I saw was not working out the way we had wanted it to. And it was an opportunity to not go back and ask anybody else for more money at this stage and instead use money that had been allocated but not yet spent and put it in a place where we did need those additional resources and where we immediately are going to have greater impact and effect than we had in Orleans, simply because there's an entire edifice that's being created driving people towards this process. And that is an edifice that didn't exist in Orleans. It was very minuscule use.
And I think we did hear back in July, right?
We did from Council of State Governments because they're doing work on this particular issue and they're looking at Orleans. So does this mean that the Council of State Governments now needs to shift to Chittenden County? Has anyone had any conversations with the Council of State Governments about this? Because they've been working on
No,
pilot project. They had some recommendations to us that we were going to spend some time today to see if we
DOC has not, but DOC will. At a minimum, DOC will notify them about our shift on this.
It's David Demore that's doing this. Haley, I'm assuming you have all the contacts for David?
Yeah, Isaac
Or Isaac?
really has been
Okay.
conversing with him, so I'm not sure the extent of their conversation if it's in the last couple of weeks.
Because I don't know if how this will change their work, but they were analyzing
Sure.
the pilot project and now it's shifted. So how much of the 600,000, I'd like to know how much has already been expended in New Orleans? I know the numbers were really small.
I don't believe any had been, I don't
don't.
believe any had been, it was 8, there were a total of 8 people that had been referred to that process in the Newport probation and parole. And the existing staff at Newport probation and parole was able to handle that number.
So is there gonna need, I'd like to know how much it's gonna cost at the Chittenden by shifting it to Chittenden and.
For the time being, it's a shift of the money that was allocated to Orleans. That is our intention.
But how much of that's gonna be used?
To my knowledge, none was used in Orleans yet.
But how much will be used with the Chittenden?
All. We have posted for positions in order to occupy this, and it's also our expectation that this is going to outlive the current anticipated assignation of the court, right? This is a couple months. I believe that we will see a success in this.
So how many staff folks are you planning on hiring?
I believe we've posted for at least one. I'm not certain if it's more than that. I think it may be more, but I don't know the number.
Is this paying for the judge?
No, this is only for DOC. This is DOC employees. We are also doing things like making vehicles available to partners in this endeavor. Some of the things that were discussed around that Council Johnson discussed about, for example, having Vermont Emergency Management essentially take a sort of central planning role in keeping with the governor's belief that this essentially is an emergency response. We are working with VEM to make certain that we contribute vehicles, resources as necessary, but those are coming out of our existing fund budget. The idea of personnel allocations for a role. And then additionally, we're going to be looking at how we can afford some of these new treatment programs that we are envisioning.
And also the MOUD in terms of beefing that up within our facilities?
Well, I mean, I think MOUD is, we don't necessarily anticipate any significant increase in MAT. What we anticipate is a change in what we're providing, that there will actually be a more intensive, for lack of a better term, in outpatient, because they're all inpatients and corrections, but an in outpatient level of care for people who are not only getting MAT to ameliorate immediate symptoms of their substance abuse, but also getting deeper treatment to get at the things that cause folks to experience that disease.
Hang on, so that will be the treatment piece will be for those folks who have gone through the expedited court.
Initially, but obviously if we create something that works, I think it would probably be incumbent morally on us to start providing it for everybody that's in the system.
So there's also MOUD that's offered in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And those folks that go through the expedited court procedure and they're not incarcerated, would you also have them do the therapeutic piece of the MOUD in the community?
I would have to find out right now who's responsible for that and were you raising your hand? Sorry.
Oh, no.
I would have to find out who is responsible for that at this stage. For example, not through an expedited court since it's just getting on its feet, but rather a person comes out, has been getting MAT from us. Certainly that's a component of the Medicaid program that we're working on, of the 1115, is figuring out how we can ensure that they are going to be transitioned immediately and with support to an outside provider. But right now, I don't exactly know whose responsibility that is for paying for it. Kathy, do you? Are you weighing in?
No.
Oh, okay. And so I couldn't tell you whether, I mean, if DOC is paying for, which I do not believe that it is, then if we were, I would assume that we would do so for people coming out of this new rapid court as well. But if we're not, then no, I don't imagine that's a component of our commitment to this process.
Because what's going through my brain is because the MOUD program came out of my committee
Mhm.
years ago, and we were very, very clear in the committee that the MOUD program that's offered while folks are incarcerated is the exact same thing as what's offered out in the community. And therapy that goes along with it is not a requirement in the community. Therefore, it's not a requirement for all persons incarcerated. So it sounds like this expedited court procedure, those folks that do end up incarcerated and need MOUD are going to be receiving therapeutic support,
That is the intention.
which is different than what a person in the community.
So it is not a community level of care. Arguably, it is a better than community level of care. It wouldn't be a requirement. It would be a component of a potentially of a sentence, but it would certainly be an offering from at the DOC perspective.
It would be offered to the incarcerated person, but it would be up to the person to volunteer for that.
For the time being, I mean, that is one way of envisioning it. I also I'm not a judge, nor am I the prosecutor, and I don't know what kinds of terms could be actually incorporated into a sentence.
I can hit that, if you don't mind. There's two different ways to get treatment. I mean, one is this pilot docket, one of the plans is to have the additional resources to be able to have community-based treatment. Community-based treatment is not, as I understand it, being offered by DOC.
No.
DOC does have the supervision, who serves as the, I'll say, gatekeeper, traffic director to help people get into treatment. Once a judge, if the court sentences someone to an incarcerated sentence, the determination of what programs they need to engage in is up to the Department of Corrections. And so if they're in for a 1 to 3 year sentence, it'll be up to DOC to structure the in-house treatment program, as well as whatever it's going to be if someone is furloughed. If the court imposes a split sentence to serve with probation, then the terms of treatment are directed by the court at the time of sentencing. What's happened, and generally DOC would also try to incorporate that within the to serve portion. But that's when DOC would be responsible for what is happening outside of the facility, either through furlough or probation supervision or parole supervision.
That's a follow-up question real quick. So what about pretrial? Well, just on that, pretrial conditions of release, can the court order treatment for pretrial?
The court can order it under 7554, but that is not something that falls to DOC to have to provide.
Thanks.
Jenny?
Okay, so I'm gonna step back to moving the money from Orleans to Chittenden. And some of the amount of money that's used will depend upon the individuals who are engaged and what requirements what they have for requirements in terms of intervention and treatments. Yes. And so the question is, what thought has been given to that up front? Do you have categories of those who have been charged or are now going through the court process? Have you decided on the categories of those folks? And then how much money will be spent on each one? Knowing that there are 8 people in Orleans that might cost much less than the top 20 in Chittenden County. So maybe there's a way to do both. And I don't know the answer to that because I don't know whether you have segregated out specific types of criminals or those who are being charged.
The only sort of classification categorization that's going on is the number of dockets. And I would like to point out that this Burlington Chief of Staff pointed out that there were 20 people identified by the Chief of Police Burke in Burlington, 20 people who accounted for nearly 1,000 encounters and incidents in the last calendar year. Only 7 of those individuals are also on the list that the special prosecutor Waite has produced of people who have 5 or more dockets. The fact of the matter is that many of the people, including the individual with the highest number of encounters on that list that was created by the Chief of Police in Burlington, is it does not have those kinds of numbers of dockets. Many of those people in that top 20 are folks who have routine encounters. That's why they have that number. And that number, I believe Chief Burke created it by only tackling calls from the public. So it is not like a proactive police encounter of an individual would not be counted towards that person's total for the sake of this top 20 categorization. This is people who engender calls from other members of the public because of their concerning behavior, whether that is criminal or disorderly, or whether the person is in fear for the individual they're calling about. Like they appear to be overdosed or in the middle of traffic. Those individuals, a great number of them do not have, well, as I said, only 7 of them do. So the other 13 do not have 5 or more dockets. Many of them barely have real criminal history. They don't really have arrest histories because they are people who are social service challenges, deep ones, but are not going to be addressed by this docket. That is not to say that by this court and this plan, that is not to say that this plan is not going to get at some of the disorder and sort of, I think, precariousness that Burlington currently feels. I very much believe that it will. I think it will be very important. I also think just the sense of immediate accountability is going to be very important to the people who are on that list. The idea that you're not going to languish in this kind of are they or aren't they world of you know, I've been cited, I've even been to court, I've got 5 dockets, but I'm also just, everything keeps getting pushed off, and there doesn't ever seem to be a moment where I'm finally called. And as a result, I continue to do things that are problematic for me and for the community. This will address that. Is it going to get at all of the 20 that were referenced by the Burlington Chief of Staff? Not all of them, no, but it's going to be better than not. And in the same way, I think that the idea of getting treatment in the community for people on this list of people with 5 or more dockets is our best goal. Getting them help in a way that prevents their behavior, that stops their behavior, and that also treats them, but in the community, that is our best bet. The next best bet is to say, no, you can't be in the community. You've shown it again and again and again. We're going to put you into our system and we're going to try to treat you there. And then the third is, you've done it again and again and again. You can't be in the community. We're going to put you in our system. And if you don't take the treatment, well, then we still get 6 months or a year or 4 months of breather from their terrible behavior. These are people whose behavior is absolutely alien to the rest of us. We don't behave this way as individuals, but they do, for a variety of reasons, whether it's mental health, whether it's substance abuse disorder, any number of things. But I do believe that this is going to do a lot of good for this community, for Burlington.
And will we be able to do anything in Orleans? I'm just trying to sort out.
Those 8 people still.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the member, she's now the director of Newport P&P. She indicated to me, she was running this program in pilot. She indicated to me that actually several of those people they had been put into the pretrial supervision program by their own defense attorneys as a means of getting them out of being held and instead being put there. So the appetite for it, the universe of folks that were being sort of put into that program was really small. Is that to say that we abandoned it? No, of course not. I mean, I really would eventually, my personal sort of belief is that maybe this really works in Burlington. We see it rolled out in many of the other places that to start to say, hey, well, if it worked there, how about us? How about Barry? How about Brattleboro? You know, how about Newport? What can we do? And then it'll be a resource question, but.
So a question and then just a comment as well. The 20 individuals, how many are unhoused?
I believe that Burlington's data showed all of them to be unhoused but one, and I think anecdotally that individual is also essentially a surfer, a couch surfer, and was also essentially unhoused.
So I guess the other thing, just as far as.
But please know that that's public information in Burlington's, from the Burlington Police Chief's presentation to the Police Commission back in, I think, September. So it can be seen there just in case I'm wrong.
No, I think that's what I understood or thereabouts. So just as far as the move to Chittenden, I know earlier this year or when we talked about this, it was like the DOC came to us. I didn't think Orleans was the greatest place. I don't think we did.
No,
Because,
They
but-
want to start
but it's-
small.
They wanted to start,
Start little.
they wanted to start small. It's like, all right, well, whatever. But so I actually feel that where they are now is where I wish they would have been before, whether it was here or Wyndham or Rutland, but it didn't make sense to me then. And I think this is the right step, but it would have been nice if they would have asked us first.
I agree with you. I just don't want Chittenden County to be blamed.
Judge?
I would just note that as of about an hour ago, the number in the program in Orleans was 0.
So they,
My
well, is that
understanding,
because we pulled out?
no, my understanding was that, the judge actually was making a referral this afternoon. And that just may have just happened. That's what I was checking, because I told them I wanted to know what's going on. And so we have one case there, and I would note that, I support the idea of moving this to Chittenden. I think, Representative Malone may recall, that was my position in the committee. I thought back at that time, we should put it in Chittenden because it was a place with the most resources also. There were other counties that it would work also, but if you want to see if it's going to work, let's put it in a busy city and see if we can make it work.
So I think it's really important now to connect with the Council of State Governments to let them know, because they've been doing research and monitoring this and coming back with some recommendations. So they need to know it got shifted.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice to have been given a heads up, because the language when we did put this in place was that DOC would need to come back to this committee. Because we needed legislative input in terms of the pilot project to begin with. And Orleans was where it was started. Because the full cost of the program was this past session, last year was over $1 million to do it statewide, and the money wasn't there in appropriations. And only 600,000 got put in the budget. So we wanted legislative buy-in in terms of where it was first initiated. That. And then it was legislative buy-in in terms of where you expand it to. And that out on the table. Anything else before we finish up for the day? Thank you.
Thank you. It was a very long day for you, is what I mean, and not for me. It was very long for you, and I really appreciate your time, everybody.
And we're meeting again November 20th? November
20th, yes.
20th.
I might have to be Zoom.
And we're gonna have a big agenda then too, I believe. Some changes.
Well, considering how many times we went over, it's not too bad. I mean, we did delay some.
We did.